So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another one of these 8-way free-for-all battles that have cropped up in the past little while. And this one is going to be on the same gorge map that we saw the Hobbit ambush take place on, which is kind of an interesting choice for a free-for-all like this, because it does lend itself to some players being able to deploy in slightly more advantageous locations, such as Mordor over there. Interestingly enough though, based on the deployment zones, there was just one big deployment zone for the player who we are going to be viewing this battle from the perspective of, which is going to be Froggy playing as the Hobbits. So that would suggest that everyone shared the same deployment zone, which I'm not sure how they managed to make that work. But that being the case, it does also mean that players will be able to deploy really rather closely to one another, as you can see from Isengard and Umbar being literally right next to one another there. But irregardless of that, we'll rattle through the army compositions fairly quickly because this isn't a new patch, so people know what's what, and also this is a fairly long battle as well. Under normal circumstances, if I saw a battle that was nearly 50k frames long, my heart would usually sink, but considering this is an 8-way free-for-all, it's probably going to be non-stop action all the way through. At least we can hope for that. Hobbit folk, played by Froggy. He's got some hobbitry in arms, so they are armour piercing, but they are also very, very basic in terms of what they offer. Long bottom mob. The ability to hide for most of the Hobbit army could be one of the most vital things here for them. The long bottom mob, not the most damage in terms of what they can do with their projectiles, but it could very well be enough in this situation to be really, really useful. Tookish hunters, Proudfoot protectors, and Banderbrass archers, all of the ranged units which are very, very important for the Hobbits, especially the Proudfoots. Definitely the best Hobbit unit in the Hobbit folk army. Then we've got the Dunedain Rangers, who of course have got that body piercing, which can be really, really useful. Body piercing projectiles, battling Brandybucks for a bit more armour piercing. It's nice to see this battle from the perspective of the Hobbits actually, because it means we can see all of their units without them all of a sudden popping into existence when you are not on the Hobbit side. Farmers of Buckland are here as well. We've got some Bjornings. There are also the Great Eagles who are sequestered away in the corner of the map. We shall see if they prove to be a worthwhile addition for later on. Then we actually have one unit from Lothlorien, played by Eclipse 2500 of the Dark Cloud over here. So he's got some Riders of the Golden Wood overlooking onto the centre of the gorge. We will actually go through the rest of the Lorien army, considering that is the case. He's on this narrow cliffside path with some Lorinand spearmen, some Lorinand warriors, some Lorinand axemen. He's also got some Lorinand archers over here, some Uruk-hai archers from Windy. So this is the confirmation really that everyone shared the same deployment zone, because you can see two units of archers deployed inside one another, so they're going to be immediately fighting. We've also got some Snaga skirmishers who are also within some Lorinand archers. Some Uruk-hai infantry are up here also, as well as some Uruk-hai crossbowmen. So it is complete pandemonium. Lorien should be able to wipe away those Isengard resistance, if they send these units over, some Woodland Protectors, some Lorinand Axemen, some Kindred of Celeborn, some Swordmasters, some Spearmen who are already fighting off against more of the Isengard forces on these cliffs, with the Spear Guard, Lorinand Warriors, and some Uruk-hai Archers and Infantry. Down here in the gap we have Alexander 10Q, who's playing as Rhudaur. He's got some Swordsmen, some Coalfell Maidens, plenty of Javelins as you would expect, Ranodyne Berserkers, Ranodyne Rangers, more Coalfell Maidens. So yeah, very well balanced Rhudaur army with the heavily armoured Spearmen closest to the enemy, but they are right down here on the low ground, which does expose them a little bit potentially to some damage. Here in the middle, which is probably the worst place to be, you're right in the middle of the map, in the middle of all of your enemies, and you're on the low ground, is DF Morris playing as Dorwinion. He's got some Elvalin Hammerguard, he's got some Morroquendi Glade Masters, and he's also got some Morroquendi Bows over here. Plenty of Elvalin, the Vinegard, and the Infantry, and there could very well be some hidden units as well. Dorwinion have got some good units of elves that can hide, of course. Umbar, who are another one of the factions who have condensed all of their forces into one location, unlike Isengard and Lorien. Inarius has got some Balagire archers and footmen, some Balakith marksmen, Alcarondas Legion here in this triangle wedge-shaped formation, although actually pointing the wrong way if they want to respond to Isengard. Blackguards, Ardenheim Shield Guard, some Warlords of Umbar, and some Ardenheim Shield Guard again. Then we have some Lurtz hunting pack and Uruk-hai crossmen from Isengard once more, Trolls of the White Hand, more Uruk-hai infantry, some Nazkai, and some mighty champions of the White Hand. There is an army over here as well, played by Mr. Sneakman, which is Dunland, very, very numerous, I'm sure. Warg Riders, Got some Spears of War Tank. There are hidden units here, which could be Troll Short Axe Throwers, could be a few other things as well, to be fair though. Plenty of Half-Orc Spear Guard and Bane Guard, which are reasonably solid considering what Dunland's roster is. Some Walk Skirmishers here also. And then finally, last but not least, we have Mordor, played by Mevin, who has got plenty of Moran on Guard, got some Orc Fodder, Moran on Infantry, more numerous, which I like. I've always been on record as saying I like Mordor as more of a numbers-focused faction rather than the quality-centric faction that a lot of people tend to play them as. Orc Javelins, Minas Morgul's chosen. We've got some Olag High, some Moran on Archers on the high ground over there, and some fast movers as well, some Temple Inquisitors. The rest of the army presumably is hiding because this is technically dense forest. You can tell because some of the trees are disappearing, there's so many of them. But I suppose this is the best place to start because this is where the battle is going to get underway right from the off. Without further ado, let's begin. It's very rare that on the very first frame of a battle we see swords clashing. Uruk-hai crossmen immediately routing the Lorinand archers. This is the risk though with this kind of battle. If you all share the same deployment zone, if you see a location which you think is going to be particularly advantageous to you, other players are probably going to think that as well. I do think Isengard are probably going to lose up here, but they are going to be able to do a decent amount of damage to Lorien, and Lorien are the most quality-centric faction on the field today, I would say. Even more so than Umbar down here, who are immediately going to try and respond to this Isengard push. Isengard are going to have to be very aggressive here. Excuse me. Which I don't necessarily think is going to be in their favour, because Umbar have got their full might down here, whereas this is only a splinter of the Isengard army. And while Isengard's infantry is decent enough, quality-wise, Umbar are going to be able to outperform them. They're going to be reliant on their skirmishers, and also individual brilliance from units like the Nars Kai to try and make something happen down here. If this is scored resolution, which I kind of think it should be in an 8-way free-for-all, because it really does encourage the madness a little bit more. Last man standing is all well and good, but I do think a scored resolution here would be the superior way to play things. But considering it is a nearly 50,000 frame battle, I would assume there's going to be some cautious players involved here as well. Champions of the White Hand are running away from the Riders of the Goldenwood, having already given them a bit of a beating. Champions of the White Hand are moving forward, but those Snaga skirmishers are getting ripped asunder by all of the Umbarim arrows. And there's also the Warlords of Umbar who are getting into the backfield here, doing some good damage to the Uruk-hai crossbowmen, another potential damaging unit. You can see Dorwinion are immediately trying to leave the area, and they are immediately running into some resistance from Rhudaur, so both of them wanting to get off the low ground very wisely. Dorwinion actually splitting their forces. Dorwinion maybe seeing an opportunity here to do some extra damage to the units and armies that were trying to take up a position on this narrow cliffside pathway. And Dorwinion is going to send over a few Elvelyn units to try and take advantage of the chaos. Yeah, it hasn't worked out for Isengard, I think it would be fair to say. Isengard still has some forces over there which are going to be able to do some damage with their ranged attacks. Lorinand Spearmen and Elvelyn infantry clashing with one another. Lothlorien definitely having the quality edge in this particular fight, but Dorwinion should be able to overwhelm the elves up here. Watchers of the Goldenwood turning back around. So Eclipse is probably going to be able to secure this position, but at what cost? Some Snaga skirmishers taking some damage, some Uruk-hai archers in the background over there. I think it's gone okay for Lorien, to be honest. Could have been far worse when you deploy in and amongst an orcish foe like this. But it does still put them at a bit of a disadvantage going into the mid-game. Not necessarily the worst thing though. If you're the strongest player going into the late game, you can often be ganged up on. So maybe getting weakened a little bit early on is not quite the downside that it looks like. You can see here the hobbits are moving forwards now as well, starting to probe a little bit perhaps, sensing maybe an opportunity to move in and clear up whoever wins this fight, which will almost certainly be Umbar, as they continue to do their thing. Meanwhile, over here, you can see a section of the Dorwinion army is also making their way over here to potentially shoot into that mess. Kelton River Patrol, Morroquendi bows, maybe too many ranged units there. If melee units do make their way over there, they could be in a little bit of trouble. Dunland are here. Rhudaur and Dorwinion were squaring off against one another, but they have now decided to go in opposite directions. And This side of the map is still where all of the fighting is occurring. And Isengard's final defensive position could be under threat if Rhudaur decides to come over here as well. To be fair, it's already looking pretty grisly for them as Dorwinion continue to move forward. I like the way that Windy deployed his army in this battle. He wasn't content to set them all up in one place and have a sure place to stand. He spread himself throughout the battlefield to try and catch people out, and he did. He just didn't have the numbers to back that up, especially considering as it was Lothlorien he was mostly entangled with. And when it comes down to a bit of a chaotic brawl where quality starts to shine through, that was probably the worst faction on the field that could have happened, that you could have had that happen to. Would have worked out quite well actually if it were the hobbits. Oof. There goes the Isengard general. I think that was friendly fire actually from the Lurt's hunting pack. We'll get over there in just a second. There's one unit of Elvelyn infantry struggling against this glut of elves. There's Dorwinion making their presence felt over here as well. But yeah, Lothlorien clearing things up over here. Let's go and have a look at what's happening down here on the low ground. Some Corsair fencers. I mean, you have to say, Umbar have not gotten out of this fight unscathed. You wouldn't expect them to be fair. There were some decent units of Uruk-hai. There was, of course, the mighty Nazkai as well, who are still technically here, but not many of them. The Lurt's hunting pack will also have been firing into them this whole time, crossbows, doing the business, but ultimately it will be for naught in the end. The hobbits menacingly getting onto the high ground now, which is bad news bears for Umbar, because they can try and escape this way, I suppose. They'll probably take some fire from Dorwinion as they do so, but that's far more preferable than trying to tangle with the hobbits as they've got superior ground on you. In come the Bjornings. It's an interesting charge to take into the Ardenheim Shield Guard. Some of the Bjornings will fall. More to the point as well, any arrows that hit the Bjornings are not very well armoured. That is worth bearing in mind as well. Mordor are going to be coming down here, so they're going to be attacking the gorge from this angle, which is bad news for Rhudaur, I would say. Rhudaur have managed to stay out of things for now, but in terms of the terrain, Mordor will have the edge there, and it will make Rhudaur's throwing projectiles a little bit more difficult to use. More to the point as well, you can also see that huge Dunland horde, which is also up on the other side, so Rhudaur probably needs to move from this location, I would say. I would suggest actually going that way and maybe following the Morroquendi units from Dorwinion. That would put Dorwinion under serious pressure, because I don't think they're going to get much out of this engagement over here. Especially not now that Rhudaur are sending over some units as well to try and capitalise on the situation. In comes some Hammerguard. They're going to try their best against this Lorien force, but Lorien have got the numbers advantage, which is the last thing you want to be seeing when you're having to tangle with their Axemen. Stuff like the Watchers of the Goldenwood especially, of course, are very, very dangerous. We'll go over here. Spears. So a few Riders of the Goldenwood left, using their Silverthorn arrows on the fleeing Elvelyn. And pretty much the entirety of the Lorien army is being used here to try and muscle their way through a section of Dorwinion that decided to try their luck at tangling with the elves. Hasn't gone that well for them thus far. Rhudaur have now occupied this position over here. Isengard, what little they have remaining, could maybe try and take some pot shots at Rhudaur, but they don't have enough to be a genuine threat to them, you'd have to say. Climbing the hill now, Kindred of Celeborn are there. Alvalin Vinegard, the feast seems certain. Riders of the Golden will continue to shoot. That unit did return from routing, I suppose, so they are going to continue to perish. Meanwhile, Froggy content to just micro his Bjornings. I mean, microing only one cavalry unit gives you a much finer level of control than perhaps you would normally see. But Umbar, all they really need to do is stand in place and shoot the Bjornings at this point. Now they've already taken a little bit of damage. The Hobbits slowly creeping forward. The Hobbits at this point could, I think, wipe away Umbar without too many issues. There goes the Dorwinion general at the hands of the elite elves. Umbar have already taken damage at the hands of the Isengard force that was here. The Hobbits have got the numbers to completely envelop Umbar under normal circumstances. A lot of these units are actually skirmishers as well. It's just a question of how aggressive Froggy wants to be. And the answer is not very. So far, Mordor, Dunland and the Hobbit folk are all being much more standoffish. They haven't really got stuck in yet. Every other player Isengard especially, Lothlorien especially, but also Rhudaur and Dorwinion have engaged in some significant way. Now Lothlorien going up against their third foe in quick succession as they now meet with Rhudaur in combat. Again though, not enough quality really to put Lorien under real pressure over here. The Rhudaur swordsmen are not what you need against this level of elf. Rhudaur swordsmen and a unit of quality is a different matter, but them on their own are going to get butchered. Isengard is still alive, still kicking. The comeback's on. Coldfell Maidens using their javelins. I mean, this is bad ultimately for Eclipse because he's under so much pressure. He's taking damage consistently from multiple players that it's going to make life difficult for him in terms of winning the fight overall. Again, if this was scored resolution, Eclipse would be doing very well for himself at the moment. It is worth saying he hasn't killed a huge amount of higher quality units. The Elval and Hammerguard probably the only ones. But in terms of quantity of kills, he would probably be winning the fight at the moment if that was the case. But I'm almost certain that they are not the rules that are being used. Kindred of Caliborn are in the melee fight. I really like this shared deployment zone thing though, because it has forced a few of the players to be quite aggressive and be quite chaotic right from the off. Not everyone, but there it is, Mordor moving down. Dunland entering the gorge as well, and the hobbits are also slowly squeezing in from this angle as well. What have we here? More Rhudaur clansmen moving up. Lothlorien, they're going to try and leave. I think they realise that if they continue to try and push this, they were winning the initial fight, but the longer they stick around here, the more Rhudaur can commit to the fight, and ultimately that would be the end of Lothlorien. So they're going to try and leave. Having said that, there's only so far along this path they can go before they will start to incur the wrath of the hobbit skirmishers as well. So this could be a little bit messy, and Rhudaur are also chasing them down anyway. No rest for the weary. So Isengard is still, I mean, everyone is still on the field. What is this? We do have more engagements happening by the looks of things, or at least we will. Or do we? No, perhaps an alliance of convenience has been struck. Dorwinion and Umbar both damaged at this relatively early stage in the battle, considering how long we know it runs for. They see the threats that factions like the Hobbits, Dunland and Mordor pose, and we shall fight side by side, perhaps. Bjorning's on the way over. I mean, this is the sort of thing they should be doing. That's also a telltale sign that it is not scored resolution, because scored resolution means that if you see a foe before you, you kill them, or at least try to. Try and increase your score as much as possible. Morroquendi's stalkers spreading throughout the field, a few poison arrows being loosed. And to be fair, most of the Dunland army is going to be fairly weak to this sort of thing. They've got relatively entry-level units all over the park. Only really the Orthanc units have got that characteristic full plate from Isengard. Meanwhile, Mordor moving forward now. Is this going to be the end of Isengard? No, Isengard have managed to wriggle away. They are free. Forward come Mordor though. Perhaps intent on trying to attack Rhudaur. Dunedain Rangers from Froggy up on that cliff. Really nasty position this. I'm surprised more players are not actually taking up positions on these cliffs, because they are so useful. And just the one unit, I mean, it is exposed. One unit of cavalry could double back, so the Temple Inquisitors, for example, from Mordor could turn around again, come up here, and then there's no support anywhere nearby, so the Dunedain Rangers would then be in massive trouble, but they could have already filled their boots in terms of kills by then. We shall see. It is interesting that Rhudaur and Lorien are still going at it. Rhudaur clansmen continuing to try and hunt the elves down, but once again, one unit of Rhudaur clansmen is not really what's going to be required to bring this elven force down. Combination of axemen and spearmen, just the right balance of offense and defense. What's going on over here? Is there still the Bjornings? Yes, they're routing off though, with only 2 of them remaining. Nandor Glade Guard are there. Morroquendi Stalkers moving forward. A little bit more caution being shown now for many of the players. Warg Riders are here. They won't do very well under Stalker fire. Yeah, a little bit of tension creeping in now. I mean, if Rhudaur really want to kill Lorien here, they could do it. They could throw everything at Lorien and they would break, but in so doing, they would open the door massively for Mordor to engage in a bit of treachery. Lorien are doing their best to hold the line here. Let's see. Dunland Spearmen. Yeah, I mean, it's a token force which is guarding the rear here. Mordor loitering with intent. I'm surprised to see those Dunland Rangers going after a single unit of Rhudaur clansmen from the front. Maybe not the best of targets, but maybe Froggy is thinking along the same lines I was a moment ago. Try and use all that ammunition as quickly as you possibly can. Those Rhudaur clansmen are wavering. They are going to leave the front line fight, which is perhaps wise. Perhaps a mutual understanding can be agreed. And now we have a bit of a pause in proceedings, which I was kind of expecting when I saw the amount of frames that was involved. Or that were involved, I should say. So we should go out to times 2 speed. Doesn't really count as action when there's just that one unit of rangers which is doing the business. Mordor, interestingly, going down and around, so going onto the low ground. Isengard's still alive. I do wonder what Dunland intend to do. Rhudaur are coming back for another go. Lorien countercharge into the Rhudaur clansmen. Is there any quality, however? The answer is yes, the Witch Realm Enslavers are here, so that may very well be enough to tilt this fight in Rhudaur's favour eventually. Enslavers are a serious unit. Kindred of Celeborn shooting their split shots in, which is going to do quite a bit of damage to this Rhudaur army. It's going to hasten them, basically. They're going to need to hurry up, otherwise they're going to bleed manpower. And ultimately, neither of these two factions is going to get what they want out of that. Froggy, again, is being a bit too passive for me. He's just sort of sat in the corner, not doing a whole lot. This is a criticism I have of quite a lot of free-for-alls, though. There's always one or two players, perhaps, who just sort of hang out. And it's part of the reason why I do like scored resolution a little bit more, because it lights a fire under people. It means you can't just pitch your tent and wait. It's not a viable technique anymore. Speaking of which, Mr. Sneakman has dipped his toe in the waters, so to speak, and decided he didn't like it, so he's going to go back to his camping location at the top of the gorge. His Warg Riders are trying to break up the advance of Mordor, so at the very least Mordor and Dunland have now engaged in some sort of combat 12k frames in. But it's not going to go very well for Dunland if they can't get their Warg Riders out of there quickly, because Mordor is just going to swarm forward with trash, spears and trolls, which is going to be enough to break down Wargs pretty quickly. This will allow Dorwinion and Umbar a little bit more freedom, perhaps to prepare against some sort of hobbit assault. Half-Orc Spearguard are going to cover the retreat of the Wargs, and the Half-Orc Spearguard are a good unit. Definitely superior to the Orc Fodder. I mean, they won't do very well, like, basic spears like them don't tend to do very well against stuff like Olag High, but at the very least, they are going to be able to retreat up to the top of the hill. And those trolls are going to be able to fill their boots in terms of kills as well, which will please the armies of Mordor. Do they really want to chase Dunland down all the way up the hill? Perhaps they do. Dunland have got those nasty crossbows, they've also got those Snarger, which can throw their javelins. Mordor splitting themselves up a little bit, again a little bit of chaos being allowed to reign. In come the Coalfell Maids, who are going to try and push their way through, but there's still too many elves for that to really be a viable strategy. They're trying to use their axe throwers here at Rhudaur, but a little bit of movement perhaps being seen from the hobbits now, perhaps seeing an opportunity to finish Lorien once and for all. And that's a worthwhile technique, because after that you will be fighting Rhudaur, who themselves are very weak. And it also gives the impression to the other players that you aren't just sitting there and painting a huge target on your back to be ganged up on later, which is why I'm not sure why people do aggressively corner camp in free-for-alls, because ultimately it will tend to bite you more often than not. Warwick Stalkers still running around. There is Umbar. They and Dorwinion still have this uneasy truce, perhaps. The Glade Masters are there. So so they didn't lose both of their high-end units. Proudfoot Protectors. I spoke too soon. Froggy's just getting these units into position over here rather than attacking. He's waiting once more. You hate to see it. Lothlorien again victorious though. Less victorious and more the fact that they made Rhudaur lose their nerve. They retreated the units that they did have over here. What is Rhudaur intending on doing at this point? Oh, I see. They have now come to an understanding. Rhudaur and Lorien. So Rhudaur is going to retreat and allow Lorien to pass. And the hobbits will not be able to come in from the other side to wipe Lothlorien away. This now is probably the most substantial battle on the field between Mordor and Dunland. I like the fact here that Mordor is being so aggressive, but if they were going to do this, I think they needed a larger portion of their army to actually be over here to accomplish this. As it is, their army is a little bit too spread out, whereas Dunland are much more condensed, able to utilise their army in tandem with one another much more easily. There are Temple Executioners and Trolls here, which is going to be a problem for stuff like Half-Orc Spearguard, but ultimately all of the support that was with them, the basic units, are all running for the hills because of the beating they're taking at the hands of units such as the Spears of Orthanc. Really nasty crossbows. There's also the Javelins, which are going to be doing their thing. The Wargs can come back down the hill. Fast movers guarding Dunland's rear. Isengard are on the way across, perhaps? What's going on here? There's one unit, allegedly. Thorin Spears. A bit of a waste of money. Or a bit of a... well, it is technically a waste of money, but a waste of arrows, certainly, on these two already routing units. You can see here the quality of the Tookish Hunter ammunition against well-armoured and well-shielded elves. Umbar are going up this way, so Umbar, perhaps with the intention, with the Morroquendi Stalkers, of trying to punish Dunland a little bit. Which I think is fair enough. I think Dunland clearly have had the better end of this engagement against Mordor, which hasn't gone well. Morroquendi bows have made their way across, perhaps out of ammunition. If not, then that was a pretty heroic... They might be trying to help Mordor as well, in which case they shouldn't be getting so close to one another, otherwise infighting will occur whether or not an understanding has been reached. Morroquendi bows could do a decent amount of damage to Dunland. Fine elven archers. Still a bit of fighting going on over here, but yeah, that didn't go very well for Mordor, so they're going to have to change tack. Wait perhaps for Umbar to arrive at the rear. Mordor are heading here as well. I mean, if I were Dunland at this point, I'd be worried. Like, I know that I couldn't stay here. In many ways, actually, I would probably attack aggressively down the hill. With Mordor arriving from that side, with Umbar arriving from the other side with some horse archer support, I think you'd actually be better off heading into the gorge directly, sweeping aside the opposition that's down here, which is mostly archers, with your wargs. There's a few units of Moran on infantry, but that is no concern at all. I think that would be the best idea for Dunland here, and you'd take losses doing that, but you would also make yourself less of a target by taking those losses, and then all of a sudden the alliance that had formed to combat you will all of a sudden have to look at one another instead. Isengard are over here. Perhaps this is the only ally Dunland has. They're immediately going to be cycled out by the Morroquendi bows. There's Rhudaur over there as well, of course, still. Whatever happened to Lothlorien? This is where Lothlorien is, heading in this direction, which is actually quite risky because they're quite spread out, and if the hobbits really wanted to, they could come across and destroy them, but based on how passive the hobbits have been thus far, perhaps it is a reasonable expectation that isn't going to happen. Both Lothlorien and the hobbits, however, seeing the opportunity to neutralise the strongest remaining Dorwinion unit in the Morroquendi Glademasters. The hobbits, however, immediately turning around and betraying that, going after the Rise of the Goldenwood with the Great Eagles. Really awkward unit to try and deal with this. The Hobbitry army is going to try and cut Lothlorien off, and I've got to be honest, they should be able to manage it. I don't know what Eclipse is hoping to accomplish by running across this no man's land. I guess he didn't really have much of a choice. Rhudaur were already in position over there. They couldn't go along there because the hobbits were already there. They may need to form up their army though to get ready to fight them. Yeah, and here come Dunland, that they are going to attack down the hill, which I like. Snaga skirmishers and trollshaws, Morroquendi stalkers taking shots into the Snaga skirmishers there. So will Dunland be successful? They should be, because there's not really a great deal of melee infantry down here that can really stop them. I mean, the Olag High are a problem, but you should have the numbers to be able to deal with them. So that should be no concern. Half-Orc Vaneguard charging downhill as well. Half-Orc Spearguard here. Morannon Archers, Snaga. Warg Skirmishers are going to charge in here, going after the Morannon Archers. At the very least, it's less of them they're having to deal with. A few Javelins on the approach too. Umbar will now be able to claim the high ground as well, which is interesting. It's impossible to tell how these battles are going to go in an 8-way free-for-all. Things can turn around so very quickly. Dunland here, again, wiping away the Morroquendi bows, as you would probably expect given the situation. Whatever happened to Rhudaur? Are they still over there? No, that's Nazgul from Mordor. What's going on over here? So still the hobbits are just sort of hanging out. The Great Eagles are... I mean, they're trying to be frugal with their units, try and cycle charge with their Great Eagles to finish Lorien off. Could be very successful, and then they could use their infantry later. What happened to Rhudaur? Is this Rhudaur over here? It is. So Rhudaur's going right the way around as well. They vacated their initial defensive position. Also, Rhudaur is still fairly healthy as well. They took a bit of damage at the hands of Lothlorien, but they're not on their knees in the way that Isengard were after the initial moments of the fight. And Dunland are going to be able to deal with things down here. There's a few more Mordor units, but that's not really going to be too much of an issue. And all of those units have now gotten away. The Morroquendi Stalkers have got the high ground, so they can shoot as they please. Cancel that shot though. In come the Temple Inquisitors. Will this Alliance of Convenience still hold? Dunland have taken a bit more damage. Mordor still here. I mean, Dunland gotten away from this fight reasonably well. I'm still amazed that no one has pointed out the problem that the hobbits pose, given their very healthy nature still. Warg Riders are there. Meanwhile, battling Brandybugs. There is a little bit of melee engagement happening now. Froggy finally being forced into an engagement, because it looks as though Eclipse was actually the one that attacked forward. The hobbitry in arms simply too numerous for the remaining elf spearmen. Great Eagles, I mean, they're caught in melee. They don't have a melee attack, so they would lose to anything in melee because they don't have any attack. The only attack they have is their charge, substantial though that may be. Woodland Protectors. Are they going to get charged by the Great Eagles? It looks as though they will be. And there you can see the charge in action. Only 3 of them remain. Those were spears, though, so that is enough to finish the Great Eagles off. But they did do quite a lot of damage to Lorien. And also to those Glade Lords as well. This, I think, is going to be the end for Lorien, though, unless they can sequester one of their units away for the late game. That's the only way at this point they can have any sort of impact on the fight as it moves forward, because they have been bullied a little bit. They've had to engage with 4 different armies. Isengard, the Hobbits, Rhudaur, and Dorwinion, all of which have taken significant bites out of Lorien. Not something any other player on the field today has had to deal with. Nothing quite so aggressive. Mordor moving forwards. I mean, still this alliance is up and running, but I would question its necessity at this point. Yes, Dunland are still reasonably strong, but you're going to bump into one another sooner rather than later, is the point. Spears of Orthanc lagging behind a little bit. Isengard are still present on the field. Let's go up to ×2 speed temporarily. Let's go up to ×6 speed. We're in a transitory moment of the battle. And Dunland appears to be public enemy number 1. They seem to have taken that prize off of Lorien from the early game. Speaking of which, Lorien are still technically alive. Trying their best here with a few spearmen and swordmasters being poked down by these hobbit farmers. Still Dunedain Rangers alive as well, which could be so key in the late game depending on how much ammo they used already. Still a few Dorwinion units milling around. Vanderbrass archers, do they see them? I mean, at this point I don't think Froggy can hope for any alliances because he's managed to maintain his... I mean, I suppose the problem is the hobbits can hide, so it's not immediately obvious that you're ignoring them. If you're in the moment of the battle and you look at the minimap, you're like, oh, there's nothing there. When in reality there's actually like a mostly healthy army there. Which is another benefit to the hobbits having so many hidden units. It's part of the reason why we often see Mirkwood do quite well in free-for-all environments as well. So Mordor leading the way. Dunland is still there. A few units from Isengard we have. Some Crownodine Rangers from Rhudaur who are not going to attack Isengard. It would be incredible if Isengard were to win this fight given the start and how that went. But they would need the other factions to do crippling damage to one another. Oof, you can see there as well. A few of the Temple Inquisitors falling on the approach. Decent little counter charge there from the Warg Skirmishers, maybe getting in a little bit too deeply into enemy territory. One unit of Warg Skirmishers in melee is no problem for the Inquisitors, but adding more skirmishers and the support of nearby infantry and ranged units might want to ease up a little bit on that. Of course, with Mordor coming down here first, they have surrendered the high ground to Umbar. And once again, we're going to have to go up here to ×6 speed, I think. As once again, we're in a transitory moment of the battle. The hobbits really just doing their thing over there. Some Morroquendi stalkers that are actually trying to do something to the hobbits. And succeeding a little bit by the looks of things, but it's hard because so much of the hobbits have got good armor-piercing attacks, or anti-cavalry, or both. Like this over here, you can see hobbitry and arms. So I think the penny is probably dropping at this point that the hobbits haven't really done much in this fight up until very, very recently, where they've moved forward and finished off the already mostly dead Lothlorien. Lothlorien still haven't admitted defeats. They could have the odd individual unit running around. We shall have to wait and see for the late game. They are going to be able to charge in here to the long bottom mob as well, so that's a pretty good catch. Nice use of the cavalry here from Morris. Farmers of Buckland on the move. Long bottom mob reloading, firing their missiles. Dunland are on the way across. Mordor are continuing to follow Dunland. It's just it's like one of the weirdest chases you've ever seen, as two armies amble along in full view of one another. Meanwhile, there is a fight going on now though between Umbar and Rhudaur. Two armies who started off on opposite sides of the gorge down low now find themselves fighting up on its highest extremities. I don't know who's in better shape either. Rhudaur have more numbers to their name certainly, but Umbar do still have some decent missiles they can use. They're trying to use their fire arrows too. I do think if Rhudaur gets stuff like their Trollshire axe throws into a nice firing position, then it's going to be real trouble for Umbar. The Witch Realm Enslavers are also a bit of a problem for them, you would have to say. Still more damage being done. Ettenmore's Troll Hunters are still in reserve. Isengard are on the move, seeing an opportunity to slink around the battlefield with their little guerrilla force. Warlords of Umbar not terribly useful in this situation because this is impassable terrain, so you do have to go right the way around. So it is technically a choke point battle, and you can see also that Rhudaur will be able to get their axe throwers into position, and they are going to try and target down these Corsair blackguards. More than try, they are going to succeed at such things. I do worry for Rhudaur though if they continue to take that amount of arrow fire. Of course, their crossbows as well are a real issue. As Dunland and Mordor continue to dance around one another, what is Dunland going to do? Corsair Fencers in here. They should do pretty well against the very basic training of the Rhudaur fighting man. Still all of these missiles being traded back and forth, which it looks as though Umbar are getting the upper hand of. Looks as though those Balakith marksmen did just run out of ammunition, but they're going to be committed to melee, and they can do decently enough in melee. Definitely a worthwhile addition to the front line. More arrows raining down from on high. Clansmen routing off, which is a bad sign. Might be that the quality is going to be too much. Dunland Spearmen and Franadine Berserkers. Franadine Rangers moving forward. The Rangers are maybe required, but if they put themselves into harm's way, then they will be the first target for these Balagire archers. Although maybe not, maybe they haven't seen them just yet, but it's not looking good for the Rhudaur melee force. Which is terrible news, really, for Rhudaur. I think they tried to get away with committing just a little bit too little. There goes the Umbar Jam. It's not completely for nothing, but even still, what's going on here? Dunland digging themselves into a position, Dorwinion doing the same. What will Mordor do now? If they attack Dunland still, they will find themselves caught between themselves and the Hobbit. I'm really disappointed with how the Hobbits have handled this fight. I really don't like it when players play like that. I think I'm gonna get less and less kind about it when people do stuff like that, because I've seen it so often at this point, and it's really, really tiring to see players just sort of sit in place and wait for the work to be done for them. I know that it's part and parcel of free-for-alls, but when a huge proportion of the battle is you just doing that, it's not great. We saw it a little bit in that recent Silmarillion free-for-all I did, the three-way one as well. It turned into a really good fight by the end, but it was still coloured by the fact that one player in particular decided to just sort of hang out and not do an awful lot until the late game. Scored resolution is the future, I'm telling you. Rodram Javelins. They're going to do a lot of damage there to those Alcarondas Legion. The Franadine Rangers are being hounded by these two Warlords. Something needs to be done about them, because they will continue to poke down these Franadine Rangers. Even if the Franadine Rangers just stop, pull out their swords and try and bring them down themselves, that would be an improvement on the situation. Dunland Spearmen now having to hold back the angry Umbar hordes. And as we can see over here, Mordor are just going to straight up attack Dunland. They have just... I wonder why Mordor are so angry at Dunland. Tunnel Vision. This is the player I want to finish off at the cost of all else. Olag High. Continuing to do a bit of damage. Javelins forthcoming. Raining down upon the half-orc spear guard. We've got plenty of Snaga skirmishes as well, but the problem that Dunland have at this point is they can't just dump all their resources into stopping Mordor, because they know as soon as they do, the Hobbits will finally spring into action. Presumably, anyway. Still some War Grinders, which could be really useful against the Hobbits as well, to be fair, to try and get into all of those skirmishes. Minas Morgul's chosen. Those are the Temple Guard. Armour-piercing arrows. A really good choice against the very tanky spears of Orthanc. Trollshore Axe Throwers continuing to do their thing. I mean, this is tough for Mordor. They're fighting uphill into a foe that has got some good supporting tools. Even if they have got the stronger melee combatants, it's a pretty brutal fight this, you'd have to say. Two brutal fights going on. And surprise, surprise, the Hobbits are the ones dodging theirs. The only ones. Franadine Berserkers move forward. Maybe Umbar running out of a bit of steam now. Now that there is still a unit of Franadine Berserkers to deal with, and Rhudaur have got a little bit of support in place. Rhudaur could very well be the ones to go on to win this. Still got some Troll Hunters. Franadine Rangers, I think, are the really key thing here. come the Harbingers. They're going to try and get into the Frodrum Javelins, but the Javelins will certainly be able to hold their own in this sort of situation. Still some Moors Troll Hunters. Of course, our Blackguards are still alive after their encounter with 2 units of Troll Shiraxorers firing into them, and to be fair, like, they are going to continue to do some pretty good damage to those Franadine Berserkers if they are left unchecked. Orc Javelins are going to take a charge here from the Wargs, and that is going to cause them to rout. Dunland are starting to wrap up the line now. All of the support they were providing really bearing fruit. Victory seems certain. Only a fool could lose this battle. Still more javelins coming their way. Temple Inquisitors leaving. Still a few units up there, but they're all routing. Dorwinion perched on their high ground, such as they are. I thought the Hobbits were going to move in, but it looks as though they're just going to get ever so slightly closer to the fight and then stop and observe again. Minas Morgul's Chosen are starting to rout. There are still some Temple units in there who won't rout quite so easily, but yeah, Mordor's single-minded nature to try and bring down Dunland has been their undoing, because Dunland just took them to a place where their allies weren't going to follow. The help they had from Umbar previously was no longer here, and this time Dunland had superior terrain and superior support, so it's never going to go that well for Mordor, really. And a little bit more battlefield awareness probably would have made that fairly apparent. But c'est la vie. Let's have a look. Umbar also suffering. That alliance that Mordor and Umbar and technically Dorwinion formed with one another hasn't seemed to have worked, because they've ultimately left one another's side, and as a result they've been dealt with by the Northmen and the Middleman. And Dunland and Rhudaur are going to have to be the ones to try and bring down the still pretty healthy Hobbits, and I don't know if they have that in them. Dunland are doing a little bit better in terms of what they have left than Rhudaur. There's actually still some elves over here. No longer, though. Destroyed by Rhudaur. So Rhudaur still have a few units left. They still have rangers, I think. Probably hidden, but I highly doubt they all perished to a flagging Umbar army. Those rangers, though, could be absolutely vital. Now, what have we here? What will Dunland do is the question I have, because the Hobbits are going to approach them. The Hobbits have taken far less damage proportionally. I mean, Dunland still need to deal with this unit of Temple Guard. This unit of Temple Guard has been allowed to get away with a little bit too much at this point. The shape of the engagement initially was quite good, but they sort of almost allowed the Temple Guard to slip the net, getting up the hill past the wrapping up of the line. And that will allow the Temple Guard to do significantly more damage to Dunland than they were originally hoping for. I mean, now would be the time for Froggy to move in. There's really no excuse at this point. Like, Dunland are completely distracted by a single unit. You could come in and deal with them easily at this point. The only reason you're not is, well, it's disappointing to see. I'd expect more from a player who's played the game so much. Snaga Skirmishers are going to be over here. Going to do very badly against even 12 Morroquendi Glade Masters. 31 Alvalan Infantry. It was a downhill charge technically as well, albeit from a unit that isn't really designed with that in mind. But the Wargs are coming over here. Will they have better luck? Maybe? They will. They did get a decent charge there. Only 4 remain. Defeat is a distinct possibility. It's enough to rout those Alvalan infantry as well, so there's only 4 of Dorwinion's army left. Isengard is still here, which is still pretty cool. Rhudaur are on the way across. What will Rhudaur do? If Rhudaur attack Dunland, it'll make me really dislike this fight, honestly. The hobbits will be rewarded for playing a free-for-all in the most heinous way possible. There are the Temple Guard. At this point, not surrounded either. They're just going to have to fight their way through a horde of half-orcs. I mean, the Bane Guard are armor-piercing, but it's not great for Dunland. What do Dunland intend to do? Are they going to turn around and try and destroy Rhudaur? I have to say, if they allow the hobbits to get away with this, everyone in the lobby has got something to answer for as well, because it means they've all been bamboozled by hidden units. And there's no one in this game that should be getting done that hard by hidden units. Everyone has played this game enough in this particular battle to not have that happen to them. There's still some Nandor Blade Guard up there, so Dorwinion's still in with a shout. Dunland's chances are diminishing the longer they allow Mordor to continue to ruin what remains of their line infantry force. Temple Guard do rout now though, with javelin fire forthcoming. There are the Rhudaur Berserkers, Animals, Troll Hunters, Rhudaur taking up a position. Once again, we shall increase 2 times 6 speed, and we shall see how things progress. Surely not. Oh, come on, guys, please. Engage brain. There must be someone who has noticed that the hobbits still have most of their army left, surely. There's no need for this. Barrowline Rangers. I mean, Rhudaur are going to do horrid damage to Dunland, but even if they do that, it means Dunland aren't going to be able to stand up against the hobbits. Rhudaur aren't going to be able to stand up against the hobbits because their army is already small. Dorwinion have sequestered 1 unit on the hill, which is not going to be enough either. Anyone who has sort of tucked aside 1 unit to try and win the game in the late game, it's not going to work if there's still a whole hobbit army to try and face down. Rangers continue to fire. Dunland are getting out of range. What's going on over there? Snaga were firing. Looked like they were firing blanks actually. Dunland killing something. It has been a strange kind of battle, as, to be fair, 8-way free-for-alls are always going to be. It always seems like we always end with this sort of thing as well. Mr. Sneakman playing as Dunland, trying to go around the edge of the map. Reasonably healthy in the late game, but people just want him dead. And unfortunately, it's been at the cost of quite a lot in this battle. Both Rhudaur and Mordor have already fallen into that trap. No one has accounted for the hobbits, and I guess it's kind of hard to criticise Froggy for that, as it is, because he's played in a way that I don't necessarily like. It's far too passive for me, and it relies on your opponents doing most of the heavy lifting and then you basically being a glory hound in the late game. However, you can only get away with that if your opponents allow you to, and everyone else allowed the hobbits to just sort of sit there. No one thought about engaging them, other than perhaps Lothlorien, but by the time Lothlorien did that, their army had already been passed around. Such is the way of things now. Hobbits are breaking, maybe not enough being committed forward from Froggy. Maybe this playstyle will ultimately come back to bite him. If he continues to send forward individual units of hobbits like that, they're going to rout instantly. And that would be quite the incredible throw. Rhudaur will like seeing this, of course. Dunland and the hobbits going at it. They need Dunland to do a bit of damage to the hobbits. I mean, the problem is they still have Proudfoot protectors, late game pikes. In come the pebbles. attacking those wearing the armour of Isengard. For Baneguard leaving. In comes a charge from the Warg skirmishers as well, trying to stop these long-bottomed mobs, pulling out their Fred Flintstone-style clubs. It hasn't gone very well that for the Hobbits, and they really should have committed more if they intended to attack like that. Proudfoot Protectors could move in. Timing is going to be everything here for Rhudaur. I mean, I'm really pulling for Isengard to win. There's still Mordor units here as well. The Adonai Shadow Bows firing in. Dunland trying to bring them down. Immediately the Uruk-hai archers. They can say to Mordor, "Don't worry, I'm trying to help you. Any stray shots that hit your Shadow Bows, fear not." They are unintentional. Tukish hunters getting butchered. Yeah, not a particularly well executed assault that from the Hobbits. Dunland in trouble. Rhudaur getting ready to make their play. Banderbrass archers are over here as well, and they are going to hunt down those shadow bows. As long as they leave Isengard alone. Still 3 champions of the White Hand. Uruk-hai archers now out of ammunition. I really want Isengard to win this, I'm not going to lie. I think it's unlikely. The amount of damage that would need to be done to the Hobbits by Dunland is going to be substantial, and this is the problem, like I said. Proudfoot Protectors are good pikes. When you have that sort of thing in the late game and no one has an answer to it, it can be so incredibly difficult. Some Spear Guard there. When are Dorwinion going to commit their units that they've got hidden up here? I think there's only 1 unit of Nandor Glade Guard, to be fair, but still, could yet prove useful. Battling Brandybucks, that armour piercing will be useful against these half-orcs as well. The reverse cannot be said for the Baneguard's armour piercing. I mean, the Proudfoots are armoured, I suppose, but then it's difficult to actually get an attack to land on them because of the length of their weaponry. Long-bottom mob getting engaged here by the Baneguard, however. And there's Troll Hunters. And still with a bit of ammunition in something like crossbows as well. This is why the Hobbits presented such a problem, because they haven't had to engage so much, so all of their resources are still intact. Dunland have had to dump all of their range support into facing their foes so far. Everyone has. Rhudaur, like, they may still have the odd volley or 2 left, but it's not going to be substantial. Are they still going to try and go after Dunland? No, come on, Alexander, please. Dunland are in tatters. Spears of Orthanc and Snaga skirmishers. Yes, they're up on the hill, but like, that's mostly garbage. You can't be serious. You're not going to leave the Hobbits to do their thing. Windy still has some Snaga skirmishers of his own. Still pebbles being used as well. Are they being used on the Etenwalls Troll Hunters? That would really call it to question. Rhudaur has continued ignoring, really, of the Hobbits. Dunland getting up onto this hill. There are those Nandor Glade Guard that are up here, of course, which will make Mr. Sneakman stay up there a little bit more uncomfortable. Still amazed that Windy's alive. Adonai Shadow Bows are routing. Snaga skirmishers are still here. They're getting hit by the Granadine Rangers, aren't they? All of this, look, they've still got Dunedain Rangers, they've still got Banderbrass Archers who are half decent in melee. More Hobbitry in arms, 2 units of Proudfoots. More Hobbitry in arms. And yet Rhudaur still were looking like, no, we're going to go after Dunland. Why? What possesses you to think in such ways? I think Windy's got the right idea. It looks like he's actually going to attack the Hobbits, realign. I mean, he's not going to have enough, I don't think, to actually achieve much. Especially not with the Farmers of Buckland over here. They're going to slice through these Uruk-hai archers off the charge extremely quickly. He's going into the Band of Brass archers with his remaining champions of the White Hound, but yeah, this could be the end of brave Isengard. They're going to try and do a bit of damage to the hobbits to give someone else a chance. The true heroes of this game. Only really present for the very beginning and the very end, but champions of the White Hound trying to do their thing. Have decent damage there. Snaga skirmishers. They're going to have to target down those Proudfoots. Someone's going to have to. It's going to have to be them or the Rhudaur Rangers, really, isn't it? There's only 2 champions of the White Hound that remain. Proudfoot protectors shooting at them. They will get one more charge, but surely that's going to be the end of them. More javelins being utilised. They're doing their best. Longbottom mob using their stones on them. That's going to be the end of the champions of the White Hand. So one last death spasm here from Isengard. Mordor already, of course, having that inflicted upon them. So Isengard not going to be victorious here. And there they go. They had the right idea at least. No one else in this fight at any point really other than Lorien out of necessity has actively gone after the hobbits exclusively in an attacking motion, because I don't think Dunland were actually doing that. I think they were trying to get into a defensive position up here. Tookish hunters are routing. Rhudaur are still here, and at this point Rhudaur are going to be forced to acknowledge the presence of the hobbits, as they're going to be introduced to the business end of a horde of angry midget farmers. But I think in general, this battle can best be summed up by the Rhudaur players' attitude to this. They ignored the hobbits for far too long. They allowed them to get away with what they were doing. Band of Brass archers. Bit of extra AP. The numbers are going to be the thing. Proudfoots, I mean, the fight up the hill, Proudfoots will be really dominant in, unless Rhudaur can use that unit of Ettenwall's Troll Hunters to maybe kill them off, but those Frodsham Javelins are going to get charged by Farmers of Buckland, so the end is nigh. Dunedain Rangers are also starting to fire in from the backfield as well, so it's not looking great. Also, they're having to use their javelins on basic units of hobbitry and arms, which would be the last hope really for dealing with pikemen. There goes the Rhudaur General, brought down by club and spear. Proudfoot protectors getting into the fight. Hunters. A few units of Snaga skirmishers, I suppose, could be enough. Depends on angle. Okay. And more stones being used on the Rhudaur Berserkers. A threatening kind of unit, but again, it's a numbers question at this point. One Frodsham Javelin remains. He actually manages to rout and run away. Probably wisely, given the amount of Farmers of Buckland that are here. Dunland are going to have to come in, and no one's worked in tandem against the hobbits either. That's the thing. Like Dunland, when they saw they were going after Rhudaur, as much as Dunland were like, aha, justice, now you're the one getting hunted down, they really should have thought, well, hang on a minute. I'm going to need to get in there to help Rhudaur, otherwise it's all over for all of us. It's been a bizarre kind of battle in that regard, because under normal circumstances, these are the sort of players I would imagine would have seen this coming and taken steps. Because usually in a free-for-all, if you're looking in a really good and healthy position in the mid-game as the hobbits were, the other players will come after you. And on this occasion they didn't, and I can only assume it's because of the hidden units, and they just weren't paying attention. Ettenwall's Troll Hunters are here, Dunedain Rangers are in melee now. Whatever happens to those Nandor Glade Guard. Units routing. Off in the far distance there. These Proudfoot Protectors should be committed at this point. Oh, they still have ammunition, which is fair. Yeah, they should be using that, definitely. Proudfoot Protectors killing off the Bane Guard. Those Javelins trying to do their thing, but it's very difficult for them. Band of Brass Archers are going to hunt down those Ettenmoor's Troll Hunters. Yeah, and you're going to start to see routing at this point. If it comes down to just a clutch of Snaga, I don't fancy their chances. There's still 2 Nazgul left. I mean, that's a fairly substantial thing, but again, pikes. It may take a while, but they will fall eventually. 2 units cannot circumvent a pike formation. And there are the Glade Guard. Finally, after all of this time, the Avengers seem to be assembling. I say that, and immediately that is no longer the case. Betrayal. Once again, a player takes complete leave of their senses and decides that Dunland is the true threat, rather than the clearly in the ascendancy hobbits. Again, just perplexing decisions. I'm not even like that concerned anymore about the way that Froggy's played this game. I'm absolutely bemused by everyone else and how they've allowed the hobbits to get away with this and continue to do so, even at this stage in the battle where they no longer have the excuse of, oh, well, we couldn't see their units anymore. Like, now you can see the hobbits, you can see how dominant they are going to be if you don't band together and do something against them, and still they refuse to do it. It's like, nope, Dunland are the most important. We have to kill these Snaga. And, well, they'll pay the price for that, so it's no great shakes. Snaga rout. Nandor Glade Guard are going to get poked to death by the Proudfoots, as most other things will. Dunedain Rangers are up here. Keldon Ruhr Patrol are terrible in melee. So that fight will go about as well as you would expect. Snaga continue to perish. More Band of Brass Archers, more Proudfoots, 70 of them. Those Dunedain Rangers could very well fall away with the Glade Guard attacking them in the rear. A tired Hobbit and Dunedain army remains. That unit of those Keldon Ruhr Patrol are not going to be enough though, they just aren't going to be sufficient. Demons of the Desert they are not. I mean, it's not a massive force from the hobbits that remains, to be fair. Not a huge force, so it is a close one, but it's so strange, the decision making in this fight. It really is weird. Keldon Ruhr Patrol charging downhill. Again, Proudfoots, Farmers of Buckland, will be more than sufficient for dealing with this kind of unit in melee, which is really not up to much. Longbottom Mobber there. Proudfoots firing away. Keldon Ruhr Patrol are doing their thing. Oof. Those Longbottom Mob are just going to hunt them down at this point and try and stop them from firing. There's one Spear of Orthanc remaining. Dunland is still here with his general. The Nazgul is still there as well. There's one Rhudaur Berserker, so there's all of these like weird individual units of quality that are still strewn across the field. But like I said, if you can't break the formation of the Proudfoot Protectors, it doesn't really matter. They could rout those. Well, that's interesting. I mean, they could overwhelm this unit of Proudfoot Protectors at this point. Better late than never, perhaps. Need to get these units up there as well. They should still be alright. Yeah, the Proudfoots are going to turn around. They see the Nazgul, and they know that the only way to really deal with them is with a unit of pikes. Defeat seems certain for the Proudfoot Protectors, but with a little bit of support from the Band of Brass, the Farmers of Buckland. There's also those Longbottom Mob in the background there. That should be enough to finish them off. Elven melee defense may well be enough to buy them a little bit of extra time. Ooh, savage volley there from the Keldon Ruhr Patrol. I would say that if they just allowed those those units of Snaga skirmishers from Dunland to live and help them out. The hobbits probably wouldn't have won this, but Dorwinion had to charge them. He couldn't resist. And as a result, we may have seen their final hope dashed. It's a fairly even fight this between them and the Nandor Glade Guard, but as soon as there's a rear charge coming in from all those hobbits waddling down from up the hill, that will be it. And ultimately as well, like, there is still this other unit of Proudfoots which will eventually kill off the Nazgul. Yeah, this is going to be it. It wouldn't surprise me actually to see this unit rout eventually now that they're being attacked in the rear. Yeah, late game pikes being ignored for vast sections of the battle. Bizarre, really bizarre, but a fun battle to behold. All of these 8-way free-for-alls are always pretty fun. Yeah, Farmers of Buckland. Good unit as well. Really high charge bonus on the Farmers of Buckland actually, not dissimilar to the Nandor Glade Guard actually in the kind of unit that they are. They can hide anywhere. Devastating off the charge, but very lightly armoured and a bit glass cannony. Still those two Nazgul left. So Mordor are going to be the last ones left fighting, unless Dunland are still around. There is the Dunland General. Surely that Nandor Glade Guard will fall. There he goes. Let's get into position just so we can see that general sprite in the distance. I mean, these Nazgul really are actually carving their way through this unit of Proudfoots. They do kill off a Nazgul now, though. And what else can I say about this battle that I haven't already said? But at this point the hobbits are going to win. There can be no doubt. Right, yeah, it's time for times 6 speed, isn't it? There we go. The Nazgul falls to the hobbit farmers. And where is that general? There he is. He's going to admit defeat, isn't he?
The enemy army flees. If we continue like this, we will...
There we go. He does admit defeat indeed. If we're going through pure kills, Dunland does technically win, and I would say that's probably fair enough because a lot of players seem to really want Dunland dead, even when that was no longer a good idea. But you can't argue with the results. The hobbits won. For a while I was a bit critical maybe of how Froggy was approaching the fight, but ultimately, like I said, everyone allowed him to get away with that. It's criminal what he was allowed to get away with, and yet everyone just let it happen. Even when it was obvious what had happened, still Rhudaur and Dorwinion were like, no, we're going after Dunland. Even though the hobbits are the threat, going after Dunland. Why, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the decision-making process was, but irregardless, let's have a look at what did the damage for the hobbits. Yeah, Proudfoot Protectors, Dunland Rangers, as you would expect. The skirmishers for the hobbits are really doing the heavy lifting. The Great Eagle's getting 387 kills as well. Most of that was on the scattered remaining elves, which is fair enough. So yeah, big thank you to Froggy for sending this one to me, because it was a really bizarre 8-way free-for-all, even by the standards of the genre. And it's always interesting to see battles such as this. Big thank you to all the players for being a part of this one as well, because everyone needs to make scenarios like this, it's worth saying, because they are a little bit different. You have to sort of fudge the game a little bit to make this kind of battle work. But work it does, and I'm glad for that. As far as what's coming up, I did have another Eclipse scenario, but I'm going to have to get the correct map version off of him, because whatever the one he sent me was, it was not correct. So I do have another one of those, which may have already been done actually. I might actually have this one be the one that takes place after that, if possible. If it's not possible, then that one will hopefully still be coming up. I did get given a siege on Moria, but it's not entirely lore friendly, and if I'm going to do a Moria siege again, I kind of want it to be lore friendly, because it's one of those maps where it's been a while since I've done it, and I wouldn't mind doing it again, but I would want the theme to be there. If it's just a mess of factions, then it's hard to sort of really get into it. There's a few others as well, though. So yeah, we're back in business now that I finally have my internet connection back. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.